Welcome back to the second intermission where the North Bay Battalion lead the Guelph Storm 3-0, and it's the Steve and Steve show up in the booth now. I'm pleased to be joined by Steve McLean, one of the co-hosts of a pretty neat podcast, I think, called the OHL Fanboys Podcast. And Steve, welcome, and you've been having a lot of fun with this podcast. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, it's our second season, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun. A couple of years ago, a buddy of mine from Windsor named Brian Thompson and myself decided to make a podcast from a fan's point of view in the OHL, and obviously there's a lot of points of view from broadcasters such as yourself, but we just figured, let's see what a fan has to say, and surprisingly, people listen to us.
Interesting. You know what? People have an appetite for hockey in general, and I think you've tapped into some of that. It's you guys talk off the cuff, and you certainly have had some high-level guests. I mean, Patrick O'Sullivan recently, and a number of OHL broadcasters. But you have an interesting thing coming up, and we'll talk about that. You have a live YouTube broadcast, yes, and you have a pretty high-level guest for that as well.
Yes, on Sunday night, February 14th at 8 p.m. It'll be on YouTube, so the link isn't out yet, but it will be coming. We'll be tweeting it from our actual show Twitter account and our personal Twitter accounts. We're going to be having a live podcast. It'll be on video, unlike a regular podcast, which is like an audio show, yep, which is done which is out every Wednesday normally. But this is going to be a Sunday night show, and thankfully our spouses. Brian's spouse, Sky, and my spouse, Catherine, is being very gracious in giving us Valentine's Day to do this show. But Sam Cosentino is going to be on the show.
Sam Cosentino from Sportsnet. That's a pretty good guest you've got there.
Yeah, it's going to be a great show. We're going to talk some of his history. Of course, he started off on the Rogers local broadcast in Brampton and moved up to the Sportsnet ranks. So it's going to be a great show, and it's going to be very interactive when Brian and I are on for our segment. We're going to have live tweeting, and it'll be kind of like just hanging out and having some drinks with the boys while watching hockey.
Well, it's interesting, your history. You evolved as a Brampton Battalion fan. Of course, when they've moved to North Bay, as we see tonight, you have turned into a Guelph Storm fan following that team. And what a turnaround that they have had since the Christmas break. Let's have a look at some of the numbers on just what they've done since the Christmas break. You look at these stat totals from a number of players on the hockey team. And Steve, I mean, it's been a huge turnaround by about 10 players.
Yeah, it's been great. James McEwen has been great all year. He's been really the leader offensively. But, some guys, I really like the acquisition of Jake Bricknell from the Hamilton Bulldogs. He's still going to be here for a couple of years. And Matthew Hotchkiss is a guy that really needed to turn things around. He went nearly 50 games without a goal.
He gets one off his bum, and suddenly he's a scoring star again.
All you need is that one goal, Steve, and all of a sudden things break out for you too. And I mean, Michael Jigavaz has been nothing short of extraordinary for the Guelph Storm this year. And you can even see it tonight. Not a great game so far tonight, but he's come up with a few 10-bellers to keep him in the game.
Of course, coaching change was the result of Jared Scaldi, and since Jared's taken over behind the bench, it's been just a completely different team.
I think the team has a lot of confidence. And that one win they got while the team was in between head coaches against Mississauga right before Christmas, I think that gave them a little bit of swagger in their step. And you can see the record there. I mean, it speaks for itself, right? But I think just, you get that little bit of swagger about you, and suddenly things start to roll. And they got a couple wins. And even though they're on a 4-game losing streak, 3 losses in overtime, that's still pretty good for a team as young as they are. Things are still on the upswing in Guelph.
Absolutely true. And, if people wanted to follow this podcast on Twitter and subscribe to it, how can they do that?
Well, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we're on iTunes. For all those, just follow OHL Fanboys, all one word. And, of course, Brian and myself have our own personal Twitter accounts. Brian Thompson is at Toast84, and I'm at Steve McLean 888.
Well, Steve, it's been a lot of fun listening to your podcast, so we look forward to Sam Cosentino and I will be on your podcast, interestingly enough, next week.
Steve Fitzsimmons here is going to be on this week's show. It'll be coming out on Wednesday at some point, so listen for that, Steve Fitzsimmons.
I was the interviewee earlier, now I'm the interviewer, and so we've switched roles, and here it is.
I appreciate you for having me on
so
what?
Much. It's been entertaining, and we wish you well with your podcast, and it should be fun with Sam Cosentino, so don't miss that on Valentine's Day. It'll be lots of fun. And, you want to tune into that. And again, at OHL Fanboys, the Twitter account for that podcast. And we thank Steve McLean for joining us as Bill Granger rejoins us here. And Bill, certainly the Storm have some work to do here in this third period if they want to get back in this hockey game.
Yeah, there were some signs in the second period, I thought, Steve, where they had a little more energy, particularly in the last 5, 6, 7 minutes of the period. But it was that brief period from 4:07 to 5:12 where the battalion struck twice. Matt Santos with his 16th And Kisslinger with his third made it a 3-0 hockey game. But 3-0 is not insurmountable, but perhaps it's more like 4 or 5-0 when you're playing the Battalion the way they are playing tonight defensively.
Well, thank you, Bill, as that is Amadio